The summer heat pressed down on the cobblestone plaza outside Buckingham Palace like a heavy blanket. Tourists crowded behind the iron gates, cameras raised, hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous changing of the guard ceremony. Among them stood Marcus Webb, 28-year-old marketing executive from Manchester who had brought his girlfriend Sarah to London for the weekend. Marcus wore an expensive polo shirt and designer sunglasses, the kind that reflected his inflated sense of self-importance. The Royal Guards stood motionless in their iconic red tunics and bearskin hats, rifles held at precise angles. Their faces remained expressionless, trained to ignore the constant stream of tourists who treated them like living statues rather than professional soldiers. For Marcus, this was an opportunity too good to pass up. He had been drinking since lunch, liquid courage flowing through his veins as he eyed the guard nearest to the fence. Sarah tugged at his arm, sensing trouble brewing. She knew that look in his eyes, the one that appeared when he had consumed too many pints and his judgment evaporated like morning mist. Marcus had always been a show-off, someone who needed to be the center of attention at every gathering. His friends found it amusing, but Sarah increasingly found it exhausting. Today would prove to be the breaking point she had long anticipated. Marcus pulled away from Sarah's grip and pushed through the crowd, ignoring the annoyed mutters of other tourists. He approached the gate where a young guardsman named Thomas Riley stood at attention. Thomas was 23 years old, in his second year of service with the Grenadier Guards. He had trained for months to achieve the discipline required for ceremonial duties, learning to maintain composure despite heat, cold, rain, or the constant provocations of disrespectful visitors. The crowd watched with growing unease as Marcus began his performance. He started by making silly faces at the guard, waving his hands dramatically. When Thomas remained perfectly still, Marcus escalated. He began shouting jokes, crude comments about the uniform, mockery of the bearskin hat. Other tourists laughed nervously, unsure whether to be entertained or embarrassed by the spectacle unfolding before them. Thomas could hear every word, feel every gesture in his peripheral vision, but he remained fixed in position. His training had prepared him for this. The guards were authorized to respond only when someone crossed certain boundaries, and Marcus had not yet reached that threshold. Inside his stoic exterior, Thomas felt a mixture of frustration and professional pride. He would not break, no matter how much this fool tried to provoke him. Sarah stood back in the crowd, her face flushed with embarrassment. She considered walking away entirely, leaving Marcus to face the consequences of his actions alone. Their relationship had been deteriorating for months, and moments like this reminded her why. Marcus never knew when to stop, never understood that some lines should never be crossed. His need for attention and validation had become toxic, poisoning everything around him. Marcus stepped closer to the gate, emboldened by the crowd's attention and his own intoxication. He began narrating his actions like a television presenter, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. He described how funny it was that grown men dressed up like toy soldiers, how ridiculous the whole tradition seemed to him. Several tourists began filming on their phones, capturing what would soon become evidence of a profound mistake. A palace security officer noticed the disturbance and began moving through the crowd toward the gate. His name was David Chen, a veteran who had worked palace security for 15 years. He had seen countless incidents like this. Tourists who thought the ceremony was mere entertainment rather than a solemn military tradition. David quickened his pace, hoping to intervene before the situation escalated further. Marcus then did something that crossed an irreversible line. He extended his leg through the gate bars and kicked toward Thomas Riley's shin. It's not hard enough to cause injury, but enough to make contact with the guard's perfectly polished boot. The gesture was meant as the ultimate mockery, a physical violation of the guard's space and dignity. The crowd gasped collectively, the atmosphere shifting instantly from uncomfortable amusement to genuine shock. Thomas felt the kick against his boot, a sensation that triggered an immediate response according to his training and authority. The protocols were clear about physical contact. Guards had the right to respond when touched or when someone attempted to obstruct their duty. What happened next occurred with the precision and speed of military training meeting instinctive reaction in one fluid motion. Thomas brought his rifle down from its ceremonial position and executed a stamp that created a thunderous crack against the cobblestones. The sudden movement and sound made Marcus stumble backward in surprise. But Thomas was not finished. Following protocol for physical interference, he stepped forward with authority, his voice cutting through the plaza like a blade. The command that erupted from Thomas was not the voice of a silent statue, but of a trained soldier asserting his authority. His shout was so powerful, so unexpected from someone who had been motionless moments before, that Marcus lost his balance completely. The alcohol in his system, combined with genuine shock and fear, sent him stumbling backward into the crowd. Marcus's arms windmilled as he tried to regain balance. But momentum and gravity were against him. His expensive sunglasses flew from his face as he crashed into several tourists, who scrambled to avoid being knocked down with him. Finally, Marcus hit the ground hard, his back slamming against the unforgiving cobblestones. The impact drove the air from his lungs and sent a shock of pain through his spine. The plaza fell into stunned silence. Dozens of phone cameras captured the moment, recording Marcus lying on the ground, gasping for breath, his face a mixture of shock, pain, and dawning humiliation. The man who had been so confident and mocking just seconds earlier now looked small and vulnerable, sprawled on the stones like a discarded puppet. Sarah stood frozen, watching the man she thought she knew reveal himself completely in this single terrible moment. David Chen reached Marcus within seconds, his security badge visible as he pushed through the crowd. Other tourists stepped back, creating a circle around the fallen man. Marcus lay on the cobblestones, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His pride shattered into as many pieces as his sunglasses, which lay broken beside him. The pain in his back was intense, but not nearly as painful as the crushing weight of humiliation settling over him. Thomas. Riley had already returned to his position, standing at attention as if nothing had happened. His face showed no emotion, no satisfaction or regret. He had simply followed his training and executed his duty. The incident was over from his perspective, though it would be documented in reports later that evening. For Marcus, however, the consequences were only beginning to unfold. David knelt beside Marcus, his expression professional but stern. He had no sympathy for tourists who disrespected the guards, having witnessed too many incidents over the years. He checked Marcus for obvious injuries, while simultaneously radioing for additional security and medical assistance. The crowd pressed closer, phones still recording every moment of Marcus's disgrace. Social media would soon be flooded with videos of what happened, each view adding another layer to his public humiliation. Sarah finally moved forward, pushing through the onlookers to reach Marcus. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. She knelt beside him, but did not touch him, maintaining a distance that spoke volumes about her feelings. This was not the first time Marcus had embarrassed her, but it would certainly be the last. She could already envision the difficult conversation that would follow. The relationship ending not with a quiet discussion, but with this spectacular display of poor judgment. Marcus tried to sit up, but David placed a firm hand on his shoulder, instructing him to remain still until medical personnel arrived. The security officer began asking questions in a calm but authoritative voice. Had Marcus been drinking? Why did he kick the guard? Did he understand that he had assaulted a member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces? Each question felt like another stone added to the weight crushing Marcus's chest. 2 additional security officers arrived, followed by a police constable named Jennifer Walsh. Jennifer had been stationed nearby, monitoring the crowd during the ceremony. She approached with her notebook already in hand, having been briefed by David via radio about what had occurred. Her expression showed the weary professionalism of someone who dealt with tourist incidents regularly. Though this one was more serious than most, the paramedics arrived next. A man and woman team wearing high-visibility jackets. They assessed Marcus's condition, checking his spine and ribs for serious injury. Marcus insisted he was fine, desperate to escape the situation, but they insisted on proper evaluation. The physical pain was manageable, but every second lying on the ground with dozens of strangers staring down at him felt like an eternity. He could hear their whispered comments, see their disapproving faces, feel their judgment pressing down on him. Jennifer Walsh began taking statements from witnesses. Several tourists eagerly volunteered, describing how Marcus had been harassing the guard for several minutes before the physical contact. Their accounts were consistent and damning. Multiple videos were already being shared online, the incident spreading across social media platforms with remarkable speed. Someone had already created a hashtag that was beginning to trend. Marcus finally managed to sit up, his back throbbing but apparently not seriously injured. David Chen informed him that he was being detained for assaulting a royal guard and causing a public disturbance. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Assault? He had just tapped the guard's boot. It was meant as a joke, harmless fun. How could this be happening? The alcohol in his system made it difficult to think clearly, but even through the fog, he began to comprehend the magnitude of his mistake. Sarah spoke to Jennifer Walsh, providing Marcus's information and explaining that she was his girlfriend. The officer noted the hesitation in Sarah's voice, the way she distanced herself from Marcus's actions. Jennifer had seen this pattern before, partners forced to witness and then answer for someone else's terrible decisions. She felt some sympathy for Sarah, who clearly had not participated in or encouraged the behavior. The crowd began to disperse as the immediate drama concluded. Though many continued filming and photographing from a distance, the changing of the guard's ceremony continued on schedule, the other guards maintaining their positions and duties without interruption. This was not the first incident they had witnessed, and it would not be the last. The tourists' disrespect was a constant challenge, though few pushed boundaries as far as Marcus had. Marcus was helped to his feet, his legs unsteady. David Chen and another security officer held his arms, guiding him away from the plaza toward a security office. Sarah followed behind, her mind racing through the implications. Their weekend in London was ruined. Marcus would likely face charges. Their relationship was effectively over. She thought about her parents, her friends, her co-workers who would inevitably see the videos online. The embarrassment extended beyond Marcus to everyone associated with him. Inside the security office, Marcus was placed in a chair while Jennifer Walsh continued her investigation. She explained the potential charges he faced, including assault on a service of person, public disorder, and being drunk and disorderly. Each charge carried potential fines or even imprisonment. Marcus's face went from red to white as the reality penetrated his alcohol-clouded judgment. This was not a joke. This was not entertainment. This was serious legal trouble with potentially life-altering consequences. David Chen pulled up security footage from multiple cameras that covered the plaza. The video showed everything clearly, from Marcus's initial approach to the final kick that triggered Thomas Riley's response. There was no ambiguity, no room for Marcus to claim misunderstanding or accident. The evidence was comprehensive and damning. David had seen many incidents over his career, but he found Marcus's behavior particularly egregious because it was so deliberate. So calculated to humiliate someone who could not easily respond. Sarah sat in a separate area, answering questions about Marcus's behavior and their plans in London. She explained that they had been drinking at lunch, that Marcus often acted impulsively when intoxicated, that she had tried to stop him. Her voice carried a mixture of anger and sadness. This trip was supposed to be romantic, a chance to reconnect and perhaps save their struggling relationship. Instead, it had exposed the fundamental character flaws she had been trying to ignore for months. Jennifer Walsh received a call from her supervisor, discussing how to proceed. Given the public nature of the incident, the clear evidence, and the seriousness of assaulting a royal guard, they recommended formal charges. Marcus would be arrested and processed through the criminal justice system. The incident would be reported in newspapers, discussed on social media, and likely used as an example in training about tourist behavior. Marcus's name would be permanently associated with this moment of profound stupidity. The processing room felt cold and sterile, fluorescent lights humming overhead as Marcus sat with his head in his hands. The alcohol was wearing off, replaced by a pounding headache and the crushing weight of clarity. Jennifer Walsh sat across from him, her pen poised over official forms that would document his arrest. The formal caution had been delivered, his rights explained. Everything he said could be used as evidence. The gravity of the situation finally penetrated the last remnants of his bravado. Marcus attempted to explain himself, his words tumbling out in a desperate stream. He had not meant any harm. It was just a joke. He had too much to drink. He was sorry. Did they really need to press charges? Could this not be resolved with an apology? Jennifer listened without expression, having heard similar pleas countless times before. The law did not bend for regret that arrived only after consequences became clear. Actions carried weight. Yes. And Marcus was about to learn exactly how heavy those consequences could be. Sarah was contacted and informed that Marcus would be held pending a court appearance. She could collect his personal belongings from the security office. Her response surprised the officers with its coldness. She told them to keep everything, that she was returning to Manchester immediately. Marcus could handle the situation on his own. Jennifer noticed the relief in Sarah's voice, as if a decision she had been postponing for months had finally been made for her. The officer had seen relationships crumble under pressure many times, but rarely with such swift finality. In a barracks office several buildings away, Thomas Riley sat with his commanding officer, Captain William Morrison. Thomas had been relieved from his post and called in to provide a statement about the incident. Despite his professional handling of the situation, protocol required a full debriefing. Captain Morrison was a career soldier with 20 years of service, a man who had seen combat in Afghanistan and understood the difference between ceremonial duty and real danger. He also understood the importance of maintaining military dignity in the face of civilian disrespect. Thomas described the incident in clear, concise military language. The tourist had been verbally harassing him for approximately 7 minutes before making physical contact. The kick to his boot constituted assault under military and civilian law. His response followed standard operating procedures for such situations. He had used the minimum force necessary to assert authority and prevent further interference. Captain Morrison nodded, making notes. Thomas had performed his duty exactly as trained, and the captain would ensure that fact was reflected in all official reports. The captain asked Thomas how he felt about the incident. It was a question that went beyond procedure, touching on the human element beneath the uniform. Thomas paused before answering honestly. He felt frustrated that such incidents happened regularly, that tourists treated ceremonial guards as entertainment rather than professional soldiers. He felt satisfaction that the protocols worked as designed, that disrespectful behavior had consequences. But he also felt a measure of concern about the attention this incident would generate, the videos spreading online. The potential media scrutiny. Captain Morrison assured Thomas that he had acted properly and would receive full support from the regiment. The incident would be documented, but Thomas's career would not suffer. In fact, his professional conduct under provocation would be noted positively. The captain had already spoken with palace security and the police, assuring that the military perspective was clearly understood. A royal guard was not merely a tourist attraction but a serving soldier, deserving respect and legal protection. Meanwhile, Marcus was being photographed and fingerprinted, the standard processing for anyone arrested in London. Each step of the procedure stripped away another layer of his dignity. The officer handling the processing maintained professional detachment, treating Marcus like any other person charged with assault. There were no special considerations for his embarrassment, no sympathy for his ruined weekend. The system moved forward with mechanical efficiency. Indifferent to his regret, in the holding cell, Marcus sat on a hard bench and confronted the full reality of his situation. His phone had been confiscated during processing, cutting him off from the outside world. He could not check social media to see how viral the videos had become. He could not call his boss to explain why he might not return to work on Monday. He could not contact Sarah to apologize or plead for another chance. He was alone with his thoughts, and those thoughts were dark and self-recriminating. Marcus replayed the incident in his mind, seeing it now from outside perspectives. He imagined how it looked to the other tourists, to Sarah, to the guard he had kicked. The person he saw in those mental replays was someone he did not want to be. Someone arrogant and disrespectful, someone whose need for attention override basic decency. The alcohol had lowered his inhibitions, but it had not created those impulses. Those had always been there, beneath the surface, waiting for the right circumstances to emerge fully formed. His thoughts turned to his job, his family, his future. Marcus worked in marketing for a respected firm in Manchester. His position required client interaction, professional presentation, trustworthiness. How would his employer react when they learned of his arrest? Would they terminate him immediately or give him a chance to explain? He thought about his parents, traditional people who valued respectability and proper behavior. Learning that their son had been arrested for assaulting a royal guard would devastate them. His younger sister looked up to him, or at least she had. That relationship would change too. The cell door opened and Jennifer Walsh appeared with another officer. Marcus would be transported to a magistrate's court for an initial hearing. Depending on the schedule and judge availability, this could happen within hours, or he might spend the night in custody. Marcus asked about bail, about lawyers, about what would happen next. Jennifer explained the process patiently, though she had explained the same things to hundreds of people before him. The system had its own timeline, its own procedures, and Marcus would move through them, whether he understood or not, in a coffee shop near the palace. Several tourists who had witnessed the incident sat discussing what they had seen. The videos they had recorded were already being shared widely online, accumulating thousands of views and comments. The consensus among viewers was overwhelmingly against Marcus. People expressed outrage at his disrespect, satisfaction at his comeuppance, amusement at his fall. Some comments were thoughtful analyses of tourist behavior and military tradition. Others were simple mockery, memes already being created using frames from the videos. One tourist, an American teacher named Linda Rodriguez, felt conflicted about her role as a witness. She had laughed initially when Marcus started his performance, finding it amusing before it crossed into assault. Her video was one of the most widely shared, and she wondered about her responsibility in the situation. Should she have intervened earlier? Should she be profiting from advertising revenue if her video went viral? The incident raised questions about bystander responsibility and the ethics of recording other people's worst moments for entertainment. Sarah sat on a train heading back to Manchester. Watching the countryside blur past the window, her phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends who had seen the videos online. They asked if she was okay, if that was really Marcus, what had happened. She answered a few with brief responses, then turned off her phone entirely. The relationship was over. That much was clear. But she also felt a strange sense of liberation. For months, she had been making excuses for Marcus's behavior, minimizing his flaws, hoping he would mature. Now she was free from that burden, though the freedom came with its own kind of pain. The magistrate's court hearing occurred late Monday afternoon, after Marcus had spent an uncomfortable night in custody. He stood before Magistrate Eleanor Hutchins, a woman in her 50s known for her no-nonsense approach to justice and her particular distaste for those who disrespected British institutions. Marcus wore the same clothes from Saturday, now wrinkled and stained. His face showed the effects of poor sleep and constant anxiety. The duty solicitor assigned to his case, a young man named Robert Chen, advised him to plead guilty and hope for leniency. The prosecution presented their case efficiently. The videos made the incident undeniable. Multiple witness statements corroborated the sequence of events. Security footage from palace cameras showed Marcus approaching the guard with obvious intent to harass. The kick that triggered the guard's response was clearly visible from multiple angles. The prosecutor emphasized that this was not a momentary lapse in judgment, but a sustained campaign of harassment culminating in physical assault on a serving member of the armed forces. Robert Chen presented the defense as sympathetically as possible. His client had been drinking, which impaired his judgment. He deeply regretted his actions. He had no prior criminal record. This was completely out of character for him. He was a professional with a good job, not someone who regularly caused trouble. Marcus had already suffered significant consequences, including the end of his relationship and public humiliation. The solicitor asked the court to consider a conditional discharge or a community service rather than a harsh punishment. Magistrate Hutchins listened to both sides before addressing Marcus directly. She asked if he had anything to say for himself. Marcus stood, his voice shaking as he attempted to express his remorse. He was truly sorry for disrespecting the guard and the institution he represented. He understood that his behavior was unacceptable. If given another chance, he would never make such a terrible mistake again. The words sounded hollow even to his own ears. The kind of apology that arrives only after consequences make it necessary. The magistrate was unimpressed. She had heard countless similar apologies from people who regretted being caught more than their actual behavior. She noted that Marcus had not simply made a momentary error, but had engaged in sustained harassment before escalating to physical contact. The videos showed him actively seeking attention and laughs at the expense of someone who could not respond without facing discipline himself. This demonstrated a fundamental lack of respect for others and for British military traditions. Magistrate Hutchins delivered her judgment. Marcus was found guilty of assault on a service person and causing a public disturbance. She sentenced him to 180 hours of community service, a substantial fine of £3,000, and ordered him to write a formal letter of apology to Thomas Riley and the Grenadier Guards. Additionally, he was banned from all royal properties for 5 years. The sentence was designed not merely as punishment, but as education, an attempt to instill the respect for others that Marcus had clearly lacked. Marcus felt his legs weaken as the sentence was pronounced. 180 hours of community service meant weeks of his free time devoted to making amends. £3,000 was a significant financial burden. The ban from royal properties meant he could not visit numerous historical sites and attractions. But worst of all was the criminal record, a permanent mark that would follow him throughout his life, appearing on background checks for jobs, housing, and other opportunities. Robert Chen helped Marcus navigate the administrative processes following the hearing. Arrangements were made for his community service assignment, payment schedule for the fine, and collection of his personal belongings. Throughout it all, Marcus moved like someone in a dream, struggling to accept that this was really happening. The solicitor offered some practical advice about managing the consequences, rebuilding his reputation, and learning from the experience. Marcus nodded mechanically, barely processing the words. Outside the courthouse, a small group of journalists waited, having learned about the case through court records and social media. They called out questions as Marcus emerged. How did he feel about the sentence? Did he have a message for the guard he assaulted? What would he do differently? Marcus kept his head down, pushing through them without comment. Cameras flashed, capturing more images that would be published in newspapers and posted online. The public humiliation continued. Each photograph, another permanent record of his shame. Marcus took a train back to Manchester, staring out the window without seeing the passing landscape. His phone returned after his release showed hundreds of messages and notifications. His social media accounts had been inundated with angry comments. Someone had identified his employer and left negative reviews on their company page. His personal email contained messages from friends, some supportive but most disappointed or angry. His mother had called 17 times, her voicemails progressing from worried to frantic to coldly furious. At his apartment, Marcus found a note from Sarah. She had come by while he was in custody to collect her belongings. The note was brief and final. She explained that she could no longer be with someone who showed such poor judgment and disrespect for others. The incident at the palace was merely the culmination of behavior patterns she had been ignoring for too long. She wished him well in addressing whatever issues led to such actions. There was no anger in the note, just a weary sadness that somehow hurt more than rage would have. Marcus sat in his empty apartment, surrounded by the physical evidence of his former life. Photographs of happier times, gifts from Sarah, reminders of social connections that now felt fragile and uncertain. He considered calling his parents, but could not face that conversation yet. He thought about eating, but had no appetite. Sleep would not come, despite his exhaustion. Instead, he sat in the darkening room, watching the sun set through his window. Contemplating the wreckage he had created, his phone buzzed with a call from his manager at work. Marcus considered not answering, but knew that avoidance would only make things worse. He accepted the call and heard the carefully controlled voice of someone trying to remain professional, while deeply disappointed. The company had seen the videos. They had received complaints from clients. Marcus was being placed on unpaid leave pending an internal review. Depending on the outcome, his employment might be terminated. The manager suggested Marcus use this time to reflect seriously on his behavior and its impact on others. After the call ended, Marcus finally allowed himself to break down completely. Tears came in waves, accompanied by deep, racking sobs. He cried for his lost relationship, his endangered career, his ruined reputation. He cried for the disappointed faces of his parents when they learned what he had done. He cried for the guard he had disrespected, a young soldier simply doing his job. Most of all, he cried for himself, for the person he had revealed himself to be in that moment of drunken arrogance. Later that evening, Thomas Riley returned to his quarters after a long day that had included multiple debriefings about the incident. His fellow guardsmen asked about it, some joking about the viral videos, others expressing genuine concern for how he was handling the attention. Thomas appreciated their support, but found the whole situation exhausting. He had joined the military to serve, not to become an internet sensation. The incident had turned him into a symbol, a representative of military discipline versus civilian disrespect, when he simply wanted to be a soldier doing his duty. 3 weeks after the incident, Marcus began community service at a Manchester Veterans Support Center. The magistrate had deliberately chosen this placement, hoping that working with former service members would teach Marcus the respect for military personnel he had clearly lacked. His supervisor, Patricia Holmes, was a retired Army sergeant in her 60s who had served in Bosnia and Iraq. Patricia made her expectations clear from the start. Marcus would help with various tasks, from administrative work to assisting with veterans events. He would be punctual, respectful, and genuinely engaged. She had read about his case and seen the videos. While she had no sympathy for his situation, she believed everyone deserved a chance to learn from their mistakes. The work proved humbling. Marcus spent his days filing paperwork, organizing storage rooms, and helping set up support group meetings. He encountered veterans dealing with PTSD, physical disabilities, unemployment, and housing insecurity. Many had sacrificed years of their lives serving their country, returning to civilian life with challenges that would never fully disappear. Listening to their stories, Marcus began understanding the weight of military service in ways that had never occurred to him. One veteran made a lasting impression. James Crawford, a former corporal who had served in Afghanistan, had lost his left leg to an improvised explosive device. He attended the center regularly for counseling and social connection. When James learned about Marcus's situation through casual conversation, he asked to hear the full story. Marcus reluctantly explained what had happened, expecting judgment or anger. Instead, James laughed, surprising Marcus completely. James explained that he found the situation darkly humorous because it revealed such a fundamental misunderstanding about what guards do. People saw the ceremony and thought it was purely decorative, forgetting that these were real soldiers with real training. The guards could be deployed to combat zones, had undergone rigorous military preparation, and took their duties seriously. Disrespecting them was not funny, but insulting to their profession and to all who served. Marcus listened, his shame deepening as he grasped perspectives he had never considered at his advertising firm. The internal review concluded with the decision Marcus had anticipated but still dreaded: termination. The company cited his behavior as inconsistent with their values and the damage his actions had caused to their reputation. Several clients had expressed concerns about working with a firm that employed someone convicted of assaulting a servant. In the competitive world of marketing, reputation was everything, and Marcus had become a liability they could not afford. The job loss created severe financial pressures. Marcus had savings, but the £3,000 fine and ongoing living expenses would deplete them rapidly. He applied for other positions but quickly discovered that his criminal record and the viral videos made him essentially unemployable in his field. Hiring managers would search his name online, find the videos and news articles, and politely inform him they were pursuing other candidates. His professional identity, carefully built over years of education and work experience, had been destroyed in minutes. His family relationships suffered damage as well. Marcus's parents visited, their disappointment evident in every word and gesture. His mother cried, asking what had gone wrong where they had failed in raising him. His father spoke less, but his silence carried its own weight of judgment. His younger sister refused to speak to him at all, Embarrassed that her friends had seen the videos and mocked her about her brother. The family dinner was painful. It was filled with awkward silences and half-finished sentences. Marcus began therapy, initially as a requirement of his community service, but gradually for his own benefit. His therapist, Dr. Amelia Foster, helped him explore the behavior patterns that led to the incident, his need for attention and validation, his tendency to show off when drinking, his inability to respect boundaries. These were not new issues, but long-standing patterns that the incident had dramatically exposed. Real change would require examining why these patterns existed and doing the difficult work of transforming them. Through therapy, Marcus confronted uncomfortable truths about himself. His arrogance had masked deep insecurity. His showing off was a desperate attempt to feel important and valued. His disrespect for the guard reflected his own lack of self-respect. Projected outward, Dr. Foster did not offer easy solutions or quick fixes. Instead, she guided Marcus through the slow, painful process of genuine self-examination and growth. Some sessions left him feeling worse before feeling better. But he continued because he recognized the necessity of this work. The letter of apology to Thomas Riley and the Grenadier. Guards took Marcus weeks to write. He drafted multiple versions, each feeling inadequate to express the remorse he felt. Finally, he wrote from the heart, acknowledging his actions without making excuses, expressing genuine understanding of what he had done wrong and committing to becoming a better person. He had no expectation of forgiveness, only a hope that his words might carry some meaning. The letter was delivered through official channels, and Marcus never received a response. He had not expected one. Thomas Riley had no obligation to engage with the person who had assaulted him. The apology was not about obtaining forgiveness, but about taking responsibility, an acknowledgement that Marcus was trying to understand and address his failures at the Veterans Center. Marcus slowly earned Patricia Holmes's guarded approval. She noticed that he arrived early for his shifts, took initiative with tasks, and engaged genuinely with the veterans. He asked questions about their experiences, listened to their stories, and showed real interest in understanding military life. It was not the behavior of someone merely fulfilling community service hours, but of someone genuinely trying to learn and change. One afternoon, Patricia asked Marcus to help organize a ceremony honoring local veterans. The event would include a memorial service, speeches, and recognition of those who had served. Marcus threw himself into the planning, handling logistics, coordinating with speakers, and ensuring every detail was perfect. On the ceremony day, watching veterans and their families gather to remember service and sacrifice, Marcus felt a profound shift in his understanding. These were not abstract concepts or tourist attractions, but real people with real stories. Deserving dignity and respect, Sarah saw videos of the ceremony posted on the center's social media page. She noticed Marcus in the background, helping with arrangements, speaking respectfully with elderly veterans. Part of her felt satisfaction that he was facing consequences and hopefully learning from them. Another part felt lingering sadness for what their relationship might have been if Marcus had been this person all along. But she had moved forward with her life, starting to date someone new, someone who did not need alcohol and humiliation to understand basic decency. Marcus's social media accounts remained mostly dormant. The harassment had eventually died down as internet attention moved to other targets. But the videos remained online, permanent records accessible to anyone who searched his name. Marcus realized the futility of trying to get them removed. The internet never forgot. Those videos would exist forever, a permanent reminder of his worst moment. He had to accept that reality and focus on becoming someone different from the person captured in those frames. His financial situation deteriorated further. Unable to find work in marketing, Marcus took a job at a local supermarket, stocking shelves overnight. The pay was a fraction of what he had earned before, barely covering rent and basic expenses. The work was physically demanding and socially isolating, the opposite of his previous career. But it provided income and, unexpectedly, a kind of peace. There were no clients to impress, no presentations to deliver, no need to perform. He could simply work quietly, alone with his thoughts, processing everything that had happened. During his shifts, Marcus had long hours to reflect on his life's trajectory. He thought about the choices that had led to that moment at Buckingham Palace, the accumulation of small character flaws that had culminated in one spectacular failure. He recognized patterns stretching back years, instances of disrespect and arrogance that he had never confronted. The incident had not created these flaws, but had exposed them brutally, forcing him to acknowledge what he had long ignored. His therapy sessions continued, now paid for from his meager wages because he recognized their value. Dr. Foster helped him understand that redemption was not a single moment or achievement, but an ongoing process. He would carry the consequences of his actions for years, perhaps forever. The question was whether he would allow those consequences to define him negatively, or use them as motivation for genuine transformation. The choice was his. Made daily through small decisions and actions, Patricia Holmes noticed the changes in Marcus. As his community service hours accumulated, he had arrived clearly going through the motions, fulfilling an obligation. But gradually, something had shifted. He engaged more deeply with the veterans, asked more thoughtful questions, showed genuine empathy for their struggles. During a staff meeting, Patricia mentioned that Marcus had proven himself reliable and dedicated. She was considering offering him a paid position at the center once his service hours were completed, if he was interested. 6 months after the incident, Marcus completed his final hours of community service. Patricia Holmes organized a small gathering to acknowledge his completion, attended by several veterans who had gotten to know him during his time at the center. James Crawford, the veteran who had first challenged Marcus to understand military service differently, spoke briefly about the changes he had witnessed. He noted that Marcus had arrived as someone who needed to be there, but was leaving as someone who wanted to be there. The distinction mattered. Marcus accepted Patricia's offer of employment at the Veteran Center. The position paid less than his supermarket job, but the work felt meaningful in ways that stocking shelves never had. He would be helping coordinate programs, assisting veterans with accessing services, and supporting the center's mission. For the first time since the incident, Marcus felt a sense of purpose beyond merely surviving the consequences of his actions. He was moving toward something rather than just away from his mistakes. His parents visited again, this time with less disappointment and more cautious optimism. They could see that Marcus was different, that something fundamental had shifted in him. His mother noticed that he listened more carefully when others spoke, that he asked questions about their lives rather than dominating conversations with his own stories. His father observed that Marcus spoke with humility about his work at the center, expressing genuine respect for the veterans he served. His sister agreed to meet him for coffee, a small step toward rebuilding their relationship. The conversation with his sister Emma was difficult but necessary. She had been deeply embarrassed by the incident, enduring mockery from friends and acquaintances who had seen the videos. Emma admitted that she had been angry not just about what Marcus did, but about the pattern of behavior it represented. He had always been the center of attention in their family, always demanding focus and admiration. The incident had forced her to articulate resentments she had been carrying for years. Marcus listened without defending himself, acknowledging the validity of her feelings and apologizing for the burden he had placed on her. Emma asked Marcus what he had learned from everything that happened. He thought carefully before answering. He explained that he had learned about the weight of respect, how easily it could be destroyed, and how hard it was to rebuild. He had learned that actions have consequences that ripple far beyond the immediate moment, affecting relationships, careers, and futures in ways that cannot always be predicted. He had learned that who he was when inhibitions were lowered by alcohol revealed truths about his character that he needed to address. Most importantly, he had learned that change was possible but required constant effort and honest self-examination. Thomas Riley's life had also continued in the months since the incident. The attention had been intense initially, with interviews requested by media outlets and recognition from his commanding officers. He had declined most media requests, uncomfortable with the spotlight. His primary concern was returning to normalcy, continuing his service without being defined by a single incident. The videos had made him briefly famous, but Thomas valued anonymity and the quiet dignity of professional service over celebrity. Captain Morrison had recommended Thomas for a commendation, recognizing his professional conduct under provocation. The commendation was presented during a private ceremony attended by his fellow guardsmen. Thomas appreciated the recognition, but felt somewhat conflicted about receiving an award for something that should be routine, professional behavior. Still, he understood that the incident had become symbolic, representing military discipline and the importance of respecting those in service. In his quieter moments, Thomas wondered about Marcus occasionally. He had received the letter of apology through official channels. His initial instinct was to ignore it, feeling no obligation to engage with someone who had assaulted him. But he read it eventually, noting the tone of genuine remorse and understanding. Thomas did not respond, but neither did he discard the letter. It sat in a drawer in his quarters, an acknowledgement that sometimes people did learn from their mistakes. Even if their victims had no obligation to forgive them, Marcus began volunteering for additional activities at the Veterans Center beyond his job responsibilities. He helped organize a fundraising event, assisted with a job training program, and coordinated transportation for veterans with mobility challenges. Patricia Holmes noticed his dedication and began giving him more responsibilities, trusting him with sensitive tasks that required discretion and empathy. Other staff members who had been skeptical of Marcus initially began to accept him as a genuine part of the team. The financial struggles continued, but became more manageable. Marcus had negotiated a payment plan for his fine, chipping away at the debt gradually. He moved to a smaller, cheaper apartment, downsizing his life to match his new circumstances. The material losses were significant, but Marcus found unexpected freedom in having less. He no longer defined himself by possessions, professional status, or external validation. His self-worth was slowly being rebuilt on a more solid foundation of genuine contribution and personal growth. Dating remained complicated. Marcus tried several times to meet someone new, but the videos remained a barrier. Women would search his name, find the incident, and lose interest immediately. He understood their hesitation. Why would anyone want to be with someone whose worst moment was permanently preserved online? Eventually, Marcus stopped actively seeking relationships, focusing instead on becoming the kind of person worthy of trust and respect. Perhaps if he did that work genuinely, companionship would follow naturally. One afternoon at the center, Marcus was helping organize files when James Crawford asked to speak with him privately. They sat in a quiet office, and James explained that he had been following Marcus's journey since the incident. He had seen genuine effort and change, something relatively rare in his experience. James wanted to share something personal. After his injury in Afghanistan, he had gone through a dark period of anger and self-destruction. He had treated people badly, pushed away those trying to help, and felt convinced that his life was over. Recovery had required accepting help, acknowledging his mistakes, and committing to gradual improvement. He saw similar struggles in Marcus and wanted him to know that redemption was possible. The conversation moved Marcus deeply. Here was someone who had sacrificed so much in service, who had faced challenges far greater than anything Marcus had experienced, offering understanding and encouragement. It reinforced Marcus's commitment to the path he had chosen. He thanked James, struggling to find words adequate to express his gratitude. James simply nodded, suggesting they get back to work. There were veterans waiting for assistance, and that was what mattered most. As the first anniversary of the incident approached, Marcus felt a mixture of emotions. The past year had been the most difficult of his life, filled with consequences both deserved and severe. He had lost his career, his relationship, much of his financial security, and his reputation. But he had also gained things of value, perspective, humility, genuine purpose, and a clearer understanding of who he wanted to be. The person he was now would never have made the mistakes that led to that moment at Buckingham Palace. Growth had come through pain. It was growth nonetheless. Marcus decided to mark the anniversary privately by visiting a military memorial in Manchester. He stood before the names of local residents who had died in service, reading the inscriptions and dates. These were people who had given everything, who had never returned to their families and futures. His disrespect toward Thomas Riley had been, by extension, disrespect toward all who served and all who had fallen. Standing in that quiet space, Marcus made a silent promise to honor their sacrifice through his actions going forward. The videos would never disappear. The criminal record would never be erased. The damage to his reputation would always exist somewhere online, accessible to anyone who searched. Marcus had accepted these permanent consequences as the price of his actions. But consequences did not have to be the end of his story. They could be the beginning of a different chapter, one written with intention, humility, and genuine commitment to being better. The man who had mocked a royal guard and ended up on the ground was gone. The person who remained was still learning, still growing, still working to become someone worthy of respect, including his own.